First, I'd like to thank the employee engagement team out of HR and Chuck for all the, and Joan Paxton, who started this. These are wonderful programs. I think they're very rewarding for all of us. It's a great chance to come together as a community of colleagues to see the work that our coworkers have been engaged in and on things that impact us all, that create a wonderful footprint throughout the state. And I think these about EOS events really do highlight, where we're all shining in one way or another. And it's just nice when we all get to come together to celebrate that and learn a little bit about what's going on in the world and what's going on right here at EOS. So I'd especially like to thank Jenny, Josh, Census team, Vilda Mayuga, who can't be here today because she's actually presenting at a large census-related conference down in New York City, and everybody who's been working so hard on all things census. And I think you're going to learn a lot through this about the many things that DOS is doing and will be doing, as well as, what the rollout will be of this very important process that will be happening this spring into the summertime. So thank you all for coming. This is a great showing, and thank you for putting this together.
Well, thank you all for being part of this. I want to say you guys are all our ambassadors on the importance of the 2020 census, of sharing this with all of our clients, all of our constituents. So I want to thank you for participating in this training. And for those that don't know me, my name is Jenny Munoz. I work for the Office for New Americans. I serve as a policy associate, and I also help with language access. So I want to say thank you for joining us and learning about this topic. And I welcome you to be ambassadors on the 2020 census. So just a snapshot of what we will be covering today. Bear with me. The agenda. So what we will cover today is what is the census. So I want you all to take away what the census is, why it's important for our communities, for our clients, for our constituents, for the community organizations that we engage with, for the cities and for Department of State in general. So why it matters. What do I need to know about completing the 2020 census? So from this training, you will know what you need to complete the census, how it's available, when it will become available. You will also learn about what the Department of State is doing. So the Department of State has been meeting. We've been coming up with a plan to roll out census messaging internally and externally. So we will share that update with you all as well. So what is the 2020 census? There's a lovely video here on the 2020 census, but I can share with you as well that this is a requirement of the U.S. Constitution. So this is something that has been conducted every 10 years since 1790. And our goal is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. And everyone counts. You want to count every person living in the United States. There's a lovely video here that we'll play. Every 10 years, the census reports everyone living in the United States. It's written in the Constitution. I apologize, the volume's a little bit low. Thank you, Josh. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov. So it's going to count every person living in your community. The dates that we want to capture is April 1st. So that's a snapshot of what we intend to do through the 2020 census. To count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. So why is it critical? Why is this important? So there's a number of reasons why this is important. It affects representation. So this affects representation in Congress. It also affects the distribution of funding. So it impacts $1.5 trillion funding, how it's allocated to our communities. It affects data used to create businesses and to plan for government. So it affects the boundaries of school districts, the boundaries of congressional districts. It affects how representation in Congress is affected. So we really want to make sure that everyone is counted, that our communities are fully represented, because it affects as simple as our school districts, the funding that goes to help our schools. And every New Yorker counted, because not only does it affect representation in Congress, not only does it affect the boundaries for our congressional districts and our school districts, but it also affects access to funding for our communities for programs, food programs like SNAP, like WIC. It affects hospitals, the funding that goes for hospitals for our communities, as well as funding for highways, public transportation, creation of roads. So it really runs the gamut. The count is used, and it's only your chance once every 10 years to make sure that your community is counted and represented. The funding also goes to support affordable housing, Section 8 vouchers, and affordable housing planning efforts. It's used for programs like Head Start and after-school programming, SNAP, WIC, all these different programs that provide a safety net for our communities. So the funding is distributed based on the census count. So we really want to ensure that everyone is counted. Hard to count communities. So there are hard to count communities that we want to ensure are fully represented. And this is from past census efforts. We've noticed, for example, that hard to count communities include children under 5. This is a common trend. Children under 5 are a hard to count community. We also have urban difficulties and rural difficulties. There's difficulties in getting people living in urban communities counted, and the same goes to rural communities, whether they have limited internet access, they might be farm workers, they might have limited access to that information. We also have challenge for seniors. Senior citizens might not be able to participate, particularly now. The census is online, so we're aware that having limited or little to no access to technology or computer skills, it might be a barrier to entry. So we're aware of these challenges to a full count. Non-traditional housing. So we're talking about kids who may spend time with either parents, may live with a foster parent, or may live with a grandparent. So in this particular example, it's hard that child may not be counted, or that child may be counted more than once. And we'll go into that a little bit later. So those are some of the challenges to a full and complete count. So other undercounts, we have noticed that communities of color are undercounted. So for the African American community, for example, there has been an undercount of 800,000 across the U.S., including 6.5% of children. And why is this? There is a history of perhaps not trusting the government because of certain programs that have been put in place. So if a person's knocking on their door, they may not welcome that. So there's that. Similarly for the Latino community, there's language barriers. There's a lack of cultural understanding of the importance of the 2020 census. And there's also certain federal administration questions like the citizenship question that may have put this more into question whether I should participate. Who's accessing this information and for what purposes? So there needs to be more education on the safety of the 2020 census. Asian American community, 1 in 5 Asian Americans live in a hard to count census tract. So it's 76% are limited English proficient, 46% are foreign-born. So those are all additional challenges facing communities, ethnic communities, that we are acknowledging, and we're working with stakeholders to make sure the messaging is one that ensures a complete count. Why are children undercounted? So this is something that I find particularly interesting, is that children have census after census been undercounted. And there's a number of challenges, perhaps having non-traditional housing. Perhaps these children belong to households that are moving frequently. Perhaps the children are in non-traditional, non-family housing. They have foster parents or living with friends. They may have limited English proficient house parents who don't understand the process and as a result don't complete the census. So there's a number of potential reasons why there's an undercount of children. And we want to make sure that we're partnering with schools, partnering with libraries, partnering with different child care providers to engage parents on the importance that it's affecting SNAP, that it's affecting WIC, that it's affecting money for schools as well. So we really want to make sure that parents are engaged. What does it mean for children? So I mentioned some of the things that the census helps fund, or that the census data informs the funding for. And those things are listed in this slide. They include a number of programs like Head Start and Early Head Start. They include Title I grants for school districts. It affects our schools. It also helps, the census information helps provide information to provide funding for special education grants. So for special education programming, as well as school lunch programs, national school lunch programs. So there's a number of things number of programs that use the census data to help divide or help allocate the funding. So the $1.5 trillion. Census 2020, how do we participate in the census? So we've talked about the challenges, different hard-to-count communities, why it's important, but now let's discuss how do I engage in the 2020 census. So there's 3 ways to complete the 2020 census. For the first time now, we can complete the census online. So this is the first time we're able to complete the census online, and it's very exciting. It's easier in that way. You can also complete the census by phone or by mailing it in. There's a paper form. So there's 3 ways you can complete the census. If you don't complete the census, then in May, a census employee will visit your household to help you complete the census. And here's a short video.
How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, you'll receive an invite to a simple questionnaire. You can complete it online, call by phone, or send it by mail. If you don't respond, the census taker will follow up and assist you. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
Very simple, online, over the phone, or by paper. And if you don't get a response, if the Census Bureau doesn't get a response by May, a census taker will come knocking on your door. So what are the questions on the census? 10 simple questions. It is the number of people living or staying in the home on April 1st, whether the residence is a house, apartment, or mobile home, the phone number of the person that's filling out for the household, the sex, the age, date of birth, Hispanic origin or not, and race. So these are the questions that are being asked on the 2020 census, on the census form. So what is the census timeline? When will I be able to participate? So that's a great question, and one that I've received since I first started engaging in census efforts. An invitation to respond online to the 2020 census will be sent out between March 12th to March 20th. The week of March 16th to March 24th, there'll be a reminder letter. And if you haven't responded yet, there will be another reminder postcard the week of March 26th to April 3rd. Mind you, National Census Day is April 1st, so they're asking you where you're living or staying on April 1st, 2020. And if you haven't yet completed it on April 8th to April 16th that week, you'll be receiving a reminder letter and paper questionnaire. So the efforts will be for you to engage to complete the census online. Additionally, the week of April 20th to the 27th, there'll be a final reminder postcard. So that's a snapshot timeline of when you will be receiving correspondence on the 2020 census. Some households will be receiving both internet and paper form. Most of the households, however, will be receiving the postcards asking them to complete it online. Any questions so far?
Yeah, actually, so if you have a student in college in another state, how do you count that in terms of this question of where, are they included in their full residence where they have a driver's license, or are they included in the apartment that they have for 12 months in another state?
So
April 1st.
yeah.
Where they are residing, April 1st.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Great. So the question for those listening in was, what happens when I have a child that's living in, or that is in a college, and they have a New York State license, but they might be out of state? Do I count them as part of my household? The answer is, it really is where they are living on April 1st.
So that's a huge detriment to New York, and I don't know how, if there's, because it's temporary, quite honestly, in nature, and especially since the emphasis on funding for our state.
There's a net positive actually in New York. There's more people that come to school here than that leave to go someplace else to school. So, yeah, I mean, we've got 2 or 3 Ivies, we got a lot, and New York City is a big part of it too, so, yeah.
Great. Thank you. So 2020 census, we want to reiterate that it is safe. There might be concerns, but we want to reiterate that the Census Bureau collects this information to produce statistics, but it produces statistics in the aggregate form. So it doesn't use a particular household's information. That information is never published. That includes the names, the addresses, and telephone numbers. So we want to stress that this information is not shared with other federal agencies, that if a Census Bureau employee were to violate this, this is a serious federal crime. They would be subject to 5 years prison sentence or a fine of up to $250,000 or both. So we really want to stress that the Census Bureau uses aggregate data to produce statistics to help inform us about our communities, but it's not collected private data is never published or released. Yes.
So we've done a lot of work with the federal census people, and somebody, I don't know if you guys know what a GS, she's GS 15, I think, 14 or 15. So she's senior service, and when she walks around her building, like we walk around our building, if she goes into any other division area, like say if I were to go to HR or I were to go to, she has to be, even as a senior service person, has to be escorted around the office by someone who works in that office. So that, I mean, they are very tight on their security, and they take it very, very seriously.
Is this in perpetuity, or is there a sunset after 100 years?
70.
72 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
72. That's 75 or 70?
72, I think. I remember reading it yesterday.
Somewhere in the 70s.
70 plus. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, what are the telephones requested for? Is there like a follow-up or something?
Yes, so the question is, for those listening in, what are the telephone numbers requested for? So say someone doesn't complete all the questions on the census form. For whatever reason, they decide not to complete it entirely. The Census Bureau can follow up with you over the phone to ask for clarification.
They also ask for it because they don't just do the every 10-year census, centennial census. They also do the American Community Survey, and they do other census activities where they're doing counts, or it's a little bit more specific. And for those, they'll call a lot of the times instead of sending out questionnaires and stuff.
So continuing on, we discussed the questions that are on the census, but we also wanted to highlight the questions that will never be on the census. So these are, they will never ask you for your Social Security number. They'll never ask you for your bank account or credit card numbers. The Census Bureau will not ask you for money or donations. So they will not send unsolicited emails to your email account to request your participation in the census. So if you are receiving an email, that's a flag that it's a scam. If you're getting a request for Social Security numbers or for credit card information, driver's license information, personal information, that is not something the Census Bureau is requesting. A big flag.
Your public service announcement identifies how people can contact it and how to go about it. Do they also include what is not appropriate so that consumers are aware? If you have an email, a solicited email, do not respond to it?
We'll get into protections a little bit later in the slides in the presentation. And part of our task force within DOS is with consumer protection. So, Director Paul is right there.
and there is some best practice, or there's some advice as to enumerators, for example. So if an enumerator visits your home, if a census taker visits your home to collect a response to the 2020 census, you can make sure they have a valid ID badge, and they have this information on the Census Bureau website. The ID badge with their photograph and a U.S. Department of Commerce watermark and an expiration date. So they provide that feedback regarding the census takers that would be knocking on doors come May should you not complete the census. There's also a number, so we'll get into that as Josh mentioned very briefly. So here's some hotlines in case there are questions about completing the census. The Census Bureau can provide that feedback if there's any particular questions you have about engaging with the 2020 census. If there's a scam, if you receive an email and something is suspicious, if someone is knocking on your door and you feel that person is suspicious, is not a Census Bureau employee, you can also call.
In that case, they need to be called.
Yeah, so there's two different things. If you're a victim of fraud, if someone did take your information, you can report this to the New York Attorney General's office, and they will follow up with that complaint. If there's a general question about reporting a scam, you may call the Division of Consumer Protection at their hotline, and they have a mechanism to refer that out as well. So those are some of the hotlines that we wanted to highlight with you all. So languages. Another hat that I wear is I assist with language access at the Department of State. So I think it's very important to highlight how this is accessible in other languages. In addition to English, individuals can respond to the census in 12 other languages. 12 other languages are listed on this slide. I don't know if you can read it, probably not, but they include Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, French, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Japanese. There's one language that is part of our top 6 languages spoken by limited English proficient that is not captured in this list. That is Bengali. But otherwise, this is a pretty comprehensive list of 12 additional languages besides English that the census is available in. There are also over the phone. So you will be able to complete it online, over the phone as well. People will be able to call in a hotline in those same 12 languages, and they'll be able to complete the census over the phone. Additionally, there are language guides, language glossaries, and language identification cards available in 59 non-English languages. So a language guide is a guide on the census. It goes line by line, translating the questions on the census form into these 59 other languages. The language glossaries are meant for community-based organizations, libraries, others that are interested in engaging limited English proficient communities in the census. So it has a glossary of terms that are frequently used in the census. Additionally, paper forms will be sent out to certain census tracts, English, Spanish, bilingual. And enumerators will also come knocking on doors prepared to complete it in the paper form in Spanish and English. If someone speaks another language, they will refer that household to the online tool or to the over the phone mechanism to complete the census. So here's a census form example. We did speak about the questions, but here is what a paper form looks like. Apologies if this does not work. It did work before. Maybe having some technical difficulties accessing this. But it's the same 10 questions, and we can send out the link for this. Great. So now, this is where you guys all come in. The Department of State is also leading efforts on the 2020 census. So you guys are all ambassadors for the division you guys work in, for the agency, on the importance of the 2020 census, how this means funding for our communities, funding for our hospitals, representation in Congress. It really has a big impact. So we've come up with some external communication strategies. We have some flyers that we've developed. We have some materials that we hope outreach staff within divisions will be using as they go to fairs, as they go to community events, as they are sharing the work that they're doing. We also want to share with our constituents the importance of being counted in the 2020 census. This is an opportunity that only comes around once every 10 years, and the repercussions of not having everyone counted could really negatively affect our communities. So what are we doing? So we're sharing those outreach materials, some of which you'll see in the next slide. We're also having the call center, licensing and corporations call center. They will have an interactive voice response on the 2020 census starting in February. So that's coming up soon. Each public-facing division, so every division that has outreach, that does trainings, they will have slides in their PowerPoints on the 2020 census. Census updates will also be incorporated in external communications. There's some divisions that have newsletters, so we'll be incorporating highlights about the census in those newsletters. Social media and press updates, incorporating messaging. There's different efforts around the 2020 census. There's Mobilize Mondays, We Count Wednesdays, different social media toolkits that we can use to make sure that everyone that is interfacing with the Department of State, whether it's on social media, whether it's by participating in a training, participating in a community event, that they're aware of the importance of the 2020 census and how it can impact their community. So these are some of the handouts. For those listening in, you can order these through DAR. DAR is in the room right now. We want to say thank you to DAR for creating these beautiful illustrations. The first one is from the U.S. Census, but the other two, the bookmark and the Complete the 2020 Census was created in-house by the Department of State. And these are all available for outreach purposes. If you're interested in having these available for an outreach event, for your public-facing office, let's talk to me and I can discuss placing an order of any of these outreach tools. District offices. So we have 3 district offices in Albany, Buffalo, and New York City, and we'll have outreach materials available there. We'll have computers available to complete the 2020 census, and we'll have trained staff available to answer basic questions on the 2020 census too. So that's another effort we're undertaking. Custom email signature. So this, you all should see in your email signatures a tagline relating to the 2020 census. We have a number of taglines that will be changing month to month to bring awareness on the importance of the 2020 census to everyone we interact with. So you guys are really ambassadors for this messaging, and we hope that through this presentation and through other activities, you'll be able to convey just how important it is to everyone that the Department of State engages with. So this is the messaging for this month. The U.S. Constitution requires that everyone living in the United States is counted every 10 years. We all count. The messaging changes month by month, and it will automatically change in your email signature.
Wait, what?
In your email signature. ITS is doing it. ITS has...
You have to take it out.
No, ITS will automatically change. ITS does amazing things with coding. So I would, so they are the ones who coordinated that. ITS is working on making sure that all emails, including shared email accounts, have the updated email taglines. Notifications on scams. The Division of Consumer Protection will monitor potential and trending census-related scams nationwide. So we have the Division of Consumer Protection within the Department of State, and they're taking a lead role on census-related scams. They will continually be trained on these scams to counsel those calling into their call center. So the call center is available to report census-related scams, and in addition to the Division of Consumer Protection, their social media, and they will also have press releases alerting consumers on these census-related scams and what to do if you suspect fraudulent activity. Any questions? I'm certain there's a lot of questions. Yes.
Thank you, first of all, for the great work that you guys are doing. But I just have a question about those people whose languages are not included well, and they don't watch news frequently. So what are you guys planning to reach those?
That's a great question. So the question for those listening in is, what are we going to do to engage communities that speak a language other than the 12 mentioned in this list? So we have, I work for the Office for New Americans, and we have a hotline that immigrants call to ask questions on any topic that's pressing. And that hotline has translation services in over 200 languages. And we are training the hotline this February on the 2020 census, and we're going to also institute similar interactive voice response, or having all hotline staff, ask those calling in if they have completed the census. So we're rolling out a plan with the ONA hotline and engaging all callers, regardless of the language, regardless whether it's one of the top 12. And we have a vendor, Language Line Solutions, that provides interpretation services for the ONA hotline. But if there's another language that's not part of the 12, there is the paper form, available in 59 languages. So there are the language guides that are available in 59 other languages, including from Slavic to Marathi, all these different languages. So I don't know if there's a specific language you're considering or thinking about, but perhaps it's already captured through the translated language guide.
So at the federal level as well, they've identified all the hard-to-count communities and who are in those hard-to-count communities. And a lot of the hiring that they're doing is specific to those communities, to count those communities. They're called trusted partners. So you're a lot more likely to answer the door if it's somebody you know or somebody who's from your neighborhood and probably speaks the same language, is part of maybe the same church or something like that. On the state side, what we have done is we've built within communities around the state, we've built these complete count commissions, and those complete count commissions do kind of the same thing within their communities. They bring in the service providers for children, service providers for the elderly, service providers for the poor, transient, and bring those people together and talk about how they can come up with solutions for their community. Because really, they're the best ones to know, like how can you target those people within your community to get a complete count.
Are libraries engaged in
Yes.
this?
Yes.
Have been since the beginning.
Yes, they're a key partner in this effort. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't necessarily have a question, just want to
Yeah.
make a note that for distribution or programs that are looking to distribute the publication, that they actually should be requesting from you and not through DAR directly.
Okay.
So you will be involved with the accountability or track of what the distribution is. Not that we would do it. So. The other thing is, I just have a question.
Yes.
That I'm looking at your slide presentation and
Mm-hmm.
publications I have in hand. I don't see where any of these have a phone number. And I don't know whether that's something that's relative to a phone.
That's a good point. Yes.
An email or a website, but not a phone number.
Mm-hmm. So the Census Bureau, for purposes of filling out the census, has not yet released the phone number to complete the census. So once it's released, we will have to incorporate that number. We did include in the flyer, we incorporated the Census Bureau the Census 2020 website. But the phone number for questions is available, but the number to complete the census has not yet been released. And I think it will also change, it might potentially change based on the languages. I'm not certain. So it hasn't been officially released, the number to complete the census. There is a number for questions on the 2020 census. So, Thank you for your questions. Anyone listening in through WebEx, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat function. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Great, yes.
Is there a way for folks who maybe they're living in like a non-traditional housing, they don't receive a postcard and a way to respond?
Yep. So for like homeless, for transient or homeless?
That could be somebody, yeah.
So there are, on April 1st actually, there are groups like in Jamestown and Albany and Schenectady and Troy that will go out and try to engage with all of them, all the people that they know about, and try to get that count that way, yeah. That's actually, that's like the day of, that's one of the bigger pushes. Yep.
How do they keep from double counting people like that, potentially?
It's a pretty coordinated effort at the municipal level usually, yeah. And the double counting, they got it. They know how to, like the question earlier, there's a lot of like divorce, if it's her day or if it's my day, how do we count our children? Well, where they are on April 1st. It's not, or, if somebody lives, my son is going to be back for vacation, but he usually not, 90% of the year he lives in, he goes to Notre Dame, but he's on April 1st, he's at our house, we count him on April 1st. So, yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Yes.
Considering the census accounts for amount of funding for like Medicare and SNAP, like that, as you said,
Yes.
DSS office have all this information, distributing this
Yes.
information?
So each agency is undertaking efforts to highlight the 2020 census with their communities. So yes, so their OTDA
Yep.
is coming up with their own plan on engaging Social Security offices and their other constituents. So each agency is pressed to come up with a plan, an outreach plan, communications plan.
There was a call towards the end of last year from the chamber for everybody, for all the agencies to put together an engagement plan. And part of $40 million of funding or something like that, like 30 or 20 of that is state services that will be provided by, every agency towards the census.
We recently communicated with Little Falls Police Department.
Yes.
And the census tagline was on the,
Oh, with the end there.
Yeah, that was
That's
like
great.
surprised in Shenango County, it was like Shenango Counts, I'm like, what, Shenango County?
go for it.
Like, awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah,
So
that's great.
it's spreading.
No, it's great.
And I guess it's incumbent upon us
Yeah,
to keep spreading it.
Yeah.
exactly.
Red or blue, money's green, and this is about, how many people are in New York, and we need the funding just as bad as everybody else does, so,
That's a great quote.
yeah.
Yes.
The census is always a great opportunity for those who aren't employed to have
Yes.
get employed,
Mm-hmm.
a trusted partner or whatever the term is. So is there information that we can share with
Yes.
our local agencies, our
Great.
communities on how to
Huh.
become employed through this process?
Yeah, so what I would say is, if your division director, engage through your division director, or whoever your division director has made the point person, with myself and Jenny, and we can help you, come up with a game plan. A lot of your division directors have already handed in their plan that informs the DOS plan that went out, a couple months ago, but, so they may already have something, going on, but by all means, we're here to help.
And I'll share a flyer. There's a flyer that the Office of Children and Families has
OCFS,
OCFS has come up with, and it helps to also convey the message of that the earnings that one will get don't count for benefits. So that won't count against you in receiving benefits. So I'll share the flyer with you.
Are you also referring to them hiring people going out and counting?
Yes.
Yes, so that's specifically for enumerators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they still hiring?
They're still
Yeah.
hiring, yes. So that's
We've
the
been
messaging we've gotten from the Census Bureau. They're still recruiting people.
And we've been sharing that with the community service, we've been sharing that with because we did all the rounds of, so.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys are as excited about the 2020 census as Josh and I are. And I hope you will become nerds like us and answer all these questions for the clients that you guys are working with. And I want to thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions on the 2020 census, this was just a precursor, but this is recorded, and the recording and the PowerPoint slides will be shared. So keep that in mind that, that DOS engagement will be sharing that, and we really hope you are as excited as we are, and that you'll take this message to your clients and to your staff and to your colleagues. So thank you.